Welcome to Manifested Publishers.
Welcome, my dear learner, to our today's lesson. We are going to have a lesson in history and government. Our topic is European invasion of Africa and the process of colonization. And we have already defined what that means. We are studying or we are interrogating the African response to European colonization. In the previous lessons, we have been discussing the Mandinka resistance. And as we learned in our previous lessons, that the Mandinka resistance happened in West Africa. It involved the Mandinka community. It was led by one man. What was the name of the person who led the Mandinka resistance? Who was the leader of the Mandinka Empire? My dear Lana, can you remember? Can you be able to recall the name of that leader? Very good. Yes, Samori Ture was the leader of the Mandinka resistance. And in our previous lessons, we have looked at the causes, what caused them to resist the French rule. And then we also looked at the cause of the war, how the war progressed, how it began, how it was fought, and finally how it ended. We discussed that in our previous lesson. So you could, if you are joining us for the first time, you could browse through the previous lessons and find out what we discussed in those lessons. So in our today's lesson, we are going to look at the results. We are going to look at the results of the Mandinka. We're going to look at the results of the Mandinka resistance. We're going to look at the results of the Mandinka resistance. And these are the lesson objectives that we are going to have. The lesson objective is that, my dear learner, by the time we are coming to the end of this lesson, it's my hope that you learner, you my student, will be able to discuss the results of the Mandinka resistance. What were the consequences? Remember, we said the results can also be termed as the consequences or the outcomes of the Mandinka resistance. So let us look, what were the results of this resistance? We said it involved armed struggle. The leader of the Mandinka led his people to fight against the French people. So what were the consequences? What were the results of the resistance? So let us start with number one. The first result was, it resulted to starvation and famine. It resulted to starvation and famine. We said that we discovered that Samori Ture implored or used the scorched earth policy. I hope, my dear learner, you are able to remember what we said, the scorched earth policy. We were able to explain what this was. It involved burning down everything they left behind. Every crop, every store, every building, they had to burn them down as they moved forward. So this meant that they could not be able to sustain their food. They had destroyed everything. They only carried enough. They could only move with what they could carry by themselves. So they could not carry everything. So everything they had stored, they burnt it down to make sure that the French could not be able to access. So this brought about starvation. Another thing, or another reason for starvation, they could not engage. They could not engage. They could not engage in farming and trade. So the farming and trade activities were disrupted. Why? Most of the time they spend fighting. The years they spend on the war did not allow them to engage in economic activity. So that was the first result. It led to starvation. There was no food. There was a lot of famine in that area. And then number two, the second result was there was displacement. Displacement of people. There was displacement of people. There was displacement of people. As the fight went on, people were chased away. People were ran away, right? People ran away from their homes. People ran away from their homes against, or they were running away from the war. They did not want to be killed because the French were ruthless in their fighting. So they ran away from homes. Other people, the kingdoms or the empires or the communities that were on the way on which the Mandinka were moving as they moved towards the east, were displaced further from their homes. So Samori Ture used the art of displacing or conquering other or new empires or new territories. This made a lot of people to lose their homes. Number three, or the next result was there was a lot of loss of life. Most people died. A lot of people died as a result of this war. Remember, it is an armed struggle. And we discovered in our previous lesson that the French had superior weapons, which destroyed or which killed a lot of the Africans. And then we could discuss the next point as they finally lost their independence. They finally lost their independence with their surrender, right? They came under the control. They were controlled by the French. So after their defeat and their surrender to the French rule, they were now introduced to the French system of administration. They did not lead themselves. They did not do their activities as they wished. They were now under the direction. They were under the rule of the French. So their independence was disrupted. Now, the next result of their armed struggle or their resistance against the French was there was disruption. There was disruption of the traditional. There was the disruption of traditional institutions. There was disruption of the traditional institutions. So the French brought a new system of administration. There was a new there was a new system of administration. There was a new system of administration which disregarded, the French disregarded their beliefs or their structures that they had in their communities. Remember, these are a people. They have their way of life. They have their leaders. They have their way of solving conflicts amongst themselves. They have their way of relating to one another. But with the French, with the coming of the French rule, these traditional institutions, what the fabric of the society was disrupted as the French introduced a new system of administration, as we are going to study in the coming topics. They used the process of assimilation and association. We are going to study more about that in our coming lessons. So the traditional institutions that made them so comfortable were destroyed. They could no longer be able to take care, or they could not be able to associate normally as they would on their normal days, because now the French have brought a new way of life. So the next result that we could discuss there was that Samori was captured. Remember, we said Samori Ture was the center. He was the leader at that time. He had built up the empire by his own, right? Because of his bravery and his trade. So when he was captured, the system had broken down. He was the source, or he was the center of the empire. Everybody worked towards him. So when he was captured, a lot of people were demoralized, right? Yes, he was captured and he was taken to Gabon, where he stayed as or was deported, where he stayed after he had been captured. So the people were left without a leader. So they had no direction. They had no direction. They did not have a direction to move forward. Why? Because their leader, their cornerstone, the person who was leading them, had been taken away. He had been deported to Gabon. So the community could not be held together, because the person who was coming together or who was helping them had been taken away. So let us further look at the other reasons or the other results of the resistance to the Mandinka. So we have come to the next. Let us look at the number 7. The next result. There was a lot of loss of property. Similarly, as we have just talked about starvation, the process or the policy of scorched earth, the scorched earth policy made sure or brought about a lot of property being destroyed. Their homes were broken down. Their storehouses or granaries at that time were destroyed. Their food was burnt up. The infrastructure they had built in their communities was destroyed during the war. And even themselves, the soldiers who were responsible for evacuating the people, destroyed everything to make sure that the French could not be able to get. So it brought about massive loss of property, which made people to despair, right? And then there was the next reason, the second last, the next result, there was misery. A lot of misery, and suffering. There was a lot of misery and suffering among the people. Number one, they did not have food, right? They did not have enough food to feed themselves. And then also you can talk of they lived in fear. They lived in fear. All the time they were looking over their shoulder, waiting to see what is going to happen next. Are we going to be attacked? So there was a lot of suffering amongst themselves. They could not be able to be able to go on with their life normally. And then the next result, there was a rise of nationalism. Rise of nationalism. Though they had been defeated, though they lost the battle at that time, the battle that they were fighting, they were able to come up and have feelings, right? There was a feeling of belonging. There was a feeling of need for their independence. So they started to call for independence of the land. Though they had been defeated, the people now knew that it is possible to fight. Yet they had been defeated, but there was a rise of nationalism. People could now come together and started strategizing how they are going to regain their independence. And then finally, my dear Lana, the last reason that we are going to discuss in our today's lesson, there was disruption. There was disruption of economic activities. There was disruption of economic activities. We said, as we discovered in our previous lesson, as we learned in our previous lesson, once Samori Ture attacked the French, he could retreat and move eastwards so that he could run away, or he could limit the chance of the French catching up with him. So as he moved away, it meant that he could no longer undertake the trade activities which were very essential in his work or in his empire. His empire was built on trade. He could produce goods and then he could sell them or exchange them with other communities even at the coast. But now these trade activities, the routes were blocked, right? The French blocked. The French blocked trade routes. So they could no longer trade. And then finally, the mines, which were the gold mines, right, were taken over by the French. This was the cornerstone. This was their livelihood. So they could no longer be able to undertake mining, which was supporting the whole empire. So, my dear Lana, we have just looked at the 10 reasons or the 10 results of the Mandinka resistance. What came after, or what were the consequences of the resistance? So, as we end our lesson today, I want to give you a quiz, a small quiz, right, that is going to help you look at what we have discussed. So this is the question that I want you to attempt, my beloved learner. Identify the consequences, or let me say, identify the results of the Mandinka resistance. Identify the results of the Mandinka resistance. And I'm sure, my beloved learner, you are well able to discuss intensively, right, these results of the Mandinka resistance. And with that, we have come to the end of our lesson today. I've been your teacher, Conan Gakure. Have a nice time.